Right, so welcome to the video series, and this is brought to you by Master Edit. You can check the link there for the Master Edit link on the right in the description. Before we get into rules, or rather suggestions, like make the subject short or match characters to subjects, all of these rules you can find in books like Style by Joseph Williams, a book I recommend to all authors. It's excellent. I want to do a quick review of the types of sentences. And before we get into the rhetorical classification of sentences, which some might not be familiar with, let's get into what most people probably are familiar with. That is the simple sentence, the compound sentence, the complex sentence, and the compound complex sentence. When you analyze, great writers like Lois Bujold, who wrote Curse of the Shallion and other great novels, she's a fantasy author, and when you analyze some of your favorite novelists, you'll notice they use a lot of variation of sentences, but there's two kinds of sentences that they use most of, and that is the simple sentence and the complex sentence. You don't find very many compound sentences unless they're compound subjects or compound predicates, and you don't find very many complex compound sentences. So you might not remember what these are, so let's just do a quick review because it's important that we understand this before continuing. So here's an example from the book I just mentioned. This is the second sentence in the book, and this is an example of a simple sentence. Now, simple doesn't mean short. You can actually have a long, simple sentence. He glanced over his shoulder. What simple means is that you have no subordinate clauses, and you only have one main clause. So that's the definition. So just real quick, an example of like a longer, simple sentence could be Kazariel, I'm not really sure how that name is pronounced, but I'll just go with Kazariel. Kazariel heard the mounted horseman on the road over by the large tree. Could be an example of a longer, simple sentence. Okay, so now the next type of sentence is the compound sentence. And so a compound sentence, we can go to... See, I put example. I have this really big example here. But before we go into this larger example, let's just look at a simple example, which would be this here. So imagine that only the highlighted part was the sentence and the period came after again. Then this would be an example of a compound sentence. That is, you have two complete sentences that are combined with the word and. These are the simplest kind to write. These are the kind that are often abused by beginning writers. These are the kind that you want to avoid, that you want to learn to rewrite, which we'll get into. So the men who joined the holy military orders were not especially noted for their senses of humor. And he might pass them again. So that's, he might pass them again as a complete sentence, and that first part is a complete sentence, combined with and. And what I had put this here for, though, originally was to show an example of a compound complex sentence. So adding this subordinate clause, that is, it can't stand on its own. It needs to be attached to something to make sense. Being bound for the same town himself, when you have this whole sentence together, you have a compound complex sentence because you have two complete sentences and one subordinate sentence. Because a compound complex sentence all this really doesn't matter, but by definition it has at least two complete sentences and one or more subordinate clauses and sentences. Anyway, so that's what it is. And you don't want to use them all that often. These ones aren't used that often in novels, as you'll see. Okay, but we went through one that is used often. That's a simple sentence. And the one that's even used more often, usually by writers, is the complex sentence. But before we do that, I wanted to show one more example of a regular compound sentence. It's quite long and complicated, and these are some of the hardest sentences to write because you're not compounding. You're not just putting two sentences together. You're compounding a subject and you're compounding predicate. And so a quick overview by analyzing this sentence of what that means. Let's suppose that this sentence only had two subjects, these two here, the two in the beginning. Then it would read as follows. And suppose it only had one predicate, so this one, the one highlighted, would be missing. The thump of hooves and jangle of harness came on too quick a rhythm to be some careful farmer with a team. That would be an example of a compound subject. So that would be the beginning here, the compound subject, which would, in this case, be connected with and. The and would be here. But she had put several subjects into the sentence, into this compound sentence. So you have the thump of hooves, the jangle of harness, clink of bells, creak of gear, and careless echo of voices came on too quick a rhythm to be some careful farmer with a team. Now, most people use the Oxford comma, not most people, but a lot of American authors do, so that there would be a comma here a lot of the times you would notice. Okay, so that's an example of the compound subject, and here's an example of compound predicate. How do you know when you have a compound subject and compound predicate? Well, that is, you can read each subject into the action. So the subject is the doer of the sentence, and you can read the doer into the action. So the doer can, be doing the action. In this case, the doer are objects and not people. The thump of hooves came on too quick a rhythm to be some careful farmer with a team. Or jangle of harness came on too quick a rhythm. Or clink of bells came on too quick a rhythm. Or creak of gear came on too quick a rhythm. And careless echo of voices came on too quick a rhythm. So that's how you know when you have a compound subject, when you can read each subject and follow it with the predicate as if they're the ones that are doing it. That's also a test to know when you have not written a properly parallel sentence. That is, when it doesn't make sense, when you can't read both subject into the predicate, then you've written something wrong. Or wrongly, rather. Okay, so the predicate, you can do the same thing. When you have a compound predicate, you can read, or even a compound object, you can read the following sentence with one or the other. So you can read, let's just use one subject for now and pretend that this sentence only had one subject but two predicates. The thump of hooves came on too quick a rhythm to be some careful farmer with a team. Or the thump of hooves came on too quick a rhythm to be parmonious packmen driving their mules. Or maybe she intended some to be part of both, and that still works. The thump of hooves came on too quick a rhythm to be some parmonious packmen driving their mules. So that's how you can easily tell when you have written a false compound predicate, is when you can't read the subject or after the subject and what's happening, what the subject is doing, the verb. That is, it came on too quick a rhythm, and then you can't read the following part into both. And that is what follows. The object that follows can't fit to the verb, whatever. So anyway, just go over when you read your stuff, and you can easily find when you make errors like that. So it's easy to make errors. Okay, so now we're going to go to the complex sentence, which is the type of sentence that is used most often, or a lot of writers use it often. It's the one you want to get good at writing nonetheless, because subordination can be hard to get used to writing and hard to thinking in, and sometimes you might have to add a lot of these type of sentences when you're rewriting. Anyway, so here's an example. Khazaril heard the mounted horsemen on the road before he saw them. So this here, notice you have two complete sentences, and that you have one complete sentence, he saw them, and the first complete sentence, which came before, right? So these are the two complete sentences, which are being connected with before. So before is acting as a subordination. Before he saw them, Khazaril heard the mounted horsemen on the road. Usually when you have a subordinated clause, you can move the subordinated clause to the beginning of the sentence. You can also sometimes put it in the middle of the sentence as an interrupter. Okay, so that's a brief brush up on the types of sentences. And then we'll go through this brief brush up too of rhetorical classification, because it's really helpful to see sentences in this way, and then we'll get on to the rules that will impact your writing, and you'll learn how to write these beautiful, powerful sentences. Please click on the link if you want to check out some really awesome software called Master Edit. I recommend everyone try it. Just go to the site. You can try it out for free, to see how it works, what it does. It's just magnificent. Great for editing. It's like having your own editor. Okay,